Hello lovely people, back in the sewing room again. I'm Nicola, this is Stitches and Slapdashery, and I make stuff. I make a lot of stuff, a lot of the time, when I can anyway. It's been a pretty productive few days. I'll put in the segment a little later which shows you the fabric baskets I made, and also the finished beanie. Right now I am fighting with this chair pad. This one is still pinned. Fabric's gorgeous, it's quilt cotton, and I've got a couple of layers of polyester batting in the middle. And I made the bias binding from a massive piece of fabric that I got for free because it coordinated. And I don't know why I'm still so optimistic about binding edges, because it never goes well. This is the one I already sewed. And so I sewed it on the first side fine. And then I took it over to the back and I was careful to cover the stitching that I had just done, so that when I went around close to my fold of my binding, that I would catch the layer on the back. You can guess what I'm about to say, can't you? Yeah, I missed chunks. So then I thought, okay, I'll just do a second row stitching right on the binding. It looks crappy. It looks so crappy. It looks kind of twisted here as well. Right there. So now I'm unsewing it with my trusty seam ripper. So I thought, seeing as, whoops, glasses are not on my head, they're down here. Seeing as I am ripping out stitches, I might as well talk to you at the same time. You love my AliExpress reading glasses? I have 2 pairs of those, different colors. They're wacky. I think they're 2.5 times magnification, because 2 times just doesn't do it for me anymore. Thankfully, the thread that I used, even though it's a similar brown, it is a bit lighter so I can see my stitches, because otherwise I would just be wanting to throw this out the window right now. So our forecast is showing really, really cold for the end of this week. We've had a very mild winter so far. In fact, a lot of the trees are budding at the moment because they seem to think it's not winter anymore. Well, they're going to be in for a bit of a shock, because my app on my phone says that the temperature in Celsius at the end of the week is likely to be minus double digits, possibly minus 17. I have no problem with that. There's also a bit of snow in the forecast for this week, and I'm not sure how much we're supposed to get, but at least it will feel like winter. It hasn't really felt like a real winter so far. I'm quite happy to wrap up. It's one of the things I love about winter, is being able to wrap up in all my woolly layers, all the things that I made to keep warm, for the sole purpose of keeping warm. As a knitter and a crocheter, it's what we live for, right? I think so. So when I left you last time, that was January the 4th. As I'm talking to you now, it's Sunday, the 7th of January, and it is late in the day. We've had our dinner. We had lasagna tonight, which always is a success with the family. It's easy, it's brainless. I don't need to look at a recipe, and everybody likes it, except for Mr. Stitches, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. So on Thursday, I think I probably mentioned about him having to have a wisdom tooth out. So the thing is, Mr. Stitches had 2 wisdom teeth in the roof of his mouth. They were never taken out, and they basically grew forward in the roof of his mouth instead of emerging, and nobody ever suggested he should have it out or anything. And every now and again, say once a year, he would get pain in the roof of his mouth, and then he knew it would pass fairly quickly because it happened before, and so he'd get through it and then move on. Well, with the radiation treatment starting soon, he had to have it out. The oral surgeon saw him as an emergency patient on Friday. What a lovely lot of people they are there. They were so nice. And I think Mr. Stitches was rather dreading it, because having a wisdom tooth out is no fun at the best of times. I don't really remember having mine out, but they were already in, at least out of the gum when I had mine pulled. One of my kids had to go, in fact, I think it was the same office, had to go to the same oral surgeon place to have his wisdom teeth out because he has a very small mouth. They were not emerging, they were causing him pain, and the dentist said they were going to cause him problems, so we took him there and they whipped them out. But having them in the roof of your mouth means, oh, yeah, I don't really want to think too hard about exactly what they do, because it's not very nice. But it went well. Apparently, they could have found, if they had found problems where the wisdom tooth had impacted the roots of any of his molars, he could have lost 2 molars. Thankfully, that wasn't a problem. So I took him home. We picked up a prescription on the way home for some amoxicillin and some painkillers. And I parked him on the couch for the rest of the day. And because he'd had to fast, he hadn't eaten or drunk anything since the day before. So he was very grateful to manage a very, very cool cup of tea and a pot of yogurt. He ate the whole pot of yogurt. It was, I don't know how many mils, maybe 300 milliliters of yogurt. It was a fairly large tub, but that was all he ate for lunch. So really it wasn't that much, but at least it was soft and easy to eat. So that day didn't seem too bad until the painkiller they gave him before he woke up wore off, of course. So then he had to start managing the pain with the pills they'd given him. Saturday, we went to the library and we also went to pick up more of the yogurt because I had bought 1 pot of it and he liked it so much. It was a brand we'd never eaten before. It's called a Yogu, Y-O-G-G-U. And I just got the natural one because we are avoiding sugar right now, because sugar does feed cancer cells, as many people will already know. And so I made sure it was an unflavored, unsweetened one. Got 4 more pots of that. And went to the library. I picked up some books. He didn't find anything. I got a couple of recipe books, a couple of knitting books. And then we had a pretty chill day at home for the rest of the day. And then today, we went to have a cup of tea at our favourite tea shop. And we actually ended up having a couple of cups of tea each. What's nice there is that if you just have a basic brewed tea or steeped tea, and it's just leaves, and they haven't done anything else with the leaves, they'll leave them aside so that if you decide, if you're hanging around and you're having it in a mug, not a to-go cup, and you hang around and sit and chat with the other customers and the staff, of course, because they're all lovely there, then you can go and say, well, did you save my leaves? Because I'm happy to have a rebrew. So that's what we did. We ended up staying there quite a while. We never went for a walk today. By the time we had been at the tea shop quite some time, it was well and truly time for lunch. So we came home. And so now that segues right into the chair pads, because when I was at the tea shop, we sat at our usual little table, and they have a little cast iron table there that has 2 cast iron chairs. And man, they are cold and uncomfortable. I don't mind the discomfort too much, but they're cold. And so I decided that they needed a couple of chair pads for these seats. I don't know if the owner will want to use them, but I went with the fabric which I had enough of and which I thought would be fun and pretty. But I'm having these challenges with the binding now. I wanted to end up with a 14-inch round chair pad. And so I cut this, I think I cut 16-inch squares of the fabric and the batting, and then quilted it, and then I trimmed it into a rough 14-inch circle. Not perfect. And then I put my binding on, which sadly is not working out very well. That's pretty common for me and binding. This is why I did consider doing the thing where you put it all right sides together. Put it all right sides together, sew almost all the way around, flip it the other way and top stitch. And I thought, no, it'll look better if I do it with a binding because it'll have a nice edge to it. Oh, have I not learned anything from past experience? Obviously not. The cool thing about this fabric, though, it's all one fabric. It's from one quilting bolt. So this was one pattern, this was another, and another, and another. And there were 4 other colorways on there. So it was a panel. You had to buy the whole panel. You couldn't have them cut it any old where. And there were these 8 different sections. It was almost like each panel was 8 fat quarters. That's the best way I can explain it. The colors are lovely. I've made a couple of bags out of this in a couple of the other parts of it a while back. It's very pretty. I just love the colors in it. Wow. Ripping out thread goes way faster when you're talking to somebody. This is great. I was just thinking I was going to have to unpick the other one, but of course I haven't even done any sewing on that yet. All right, so now that that mess is done, unpicked. Okay, there's 2 ways I could go now. I could either try pinning down the bits that I missed. So you see here where my line of stitching from the other side didn't catch this. Do I sew around on the same line and then try again, or do I just unpick everything? I think I might unpick it all. Obviously not where I've sewn on the binding, but the second part where I tried to sew it down on the second side. Okay, so it looks like I'm going to carry on picking. The good news is I started on Mr. Stitch's adventure scarf. We did have a little clarification moment when I said to him, there's a couple of ways I can make this. I can make it into a big tube that you stick your head through. I said, or I could make it into a tube that goes around your neck and I can graft the ends together. But then he's like, oh, I was thinking of a scarf. He said it's so much easier to put it on and take it off. He's obviously not a cowl guy. And I said, okay, I can do that. I have a suspicion that by the time we get to the end of the 7 weeks or whatever it is, that I probably won't have enough for a scarf, but that's okay. I can just fill in any extra length I need by using more of the rest day color, the blue. What I was going to do was use the 5mm needles, and how many stitches did I start with? 70, 80. I started out with 5mm needles and a larger amount of stitches anyway. And I wasn't really happy. I did a couple of rounds, and the stitches were a little loose. It was fine for that hat that I made, but I just wasn't happy with how loosey-goosey they were looking. And also it was coming out as it was a tube. The idea is that I'm going to sew a tube that will become a scarf, because it's great for hiding all the loose ends when you're changing colors a lot. So I opted for the 4.5mm needles because I think that'll make a neater fabric. And I think I also reduced it to 60 stitches altogether. I think it's 60. I'm going for about a 7-inch wide finished scarf. So I already did 3 rows of the purple. So purple is bad days for whatever reason. And so the first 3 rows, because I wasn't sure of my edge treatment, I decided to do 3 rows to start with after the provisional cast on. And I'm using the purple for his diagnosis day. It was the day he got the call from the doctor to say, yeah, your biopsy showed it's actually cancer. So we are using purple for bad days. So that's the first 3 rows. And then blue is for rest days, and green is for radiation, or in the case of the first green stripe, it's just the first time he met the doctor who deals with the radiation. And red is for like blood work and scans, and also the day he found about he got his wisdom tooth out. The yellow is good days. I haven't put any of that in there yet. Actually, I will be. I've written down all the days since December 19th. And one of the good days was the day he met the dietitian, because it was a promising appointment. She was happy with his diet. She recommended L-glutamine so that he can take that 3 times a day to keep his protein intake high. And that was pretty good. And then what color am I forgetting? Purple. The yellow is for good. Purple, bad days. Yellow, good days. Blue, rest days. Rust is the chemo. And also for the day that he met the chemo doctor for the first time. He had the appointment with him. And green. What am I doing green? Oh yeah, radiation. Told you that. So I've already started. It's in a bit of a mess right now. Good grief, those Lion Brand Heartland yarns. I'm sure I didn't have this problem with the pink colorway. I may have done. I may have just blocked it out. But each time I've been trying to get the end out of the center of the ball, I've been getting yarn bath every time. So instead of a nice, neat project bag with my 6 colors sitting there beautifully with a little strand coming out the top, I've got yarn bath everywhere. I should probably make sure it's all tidied up before I carry on, because it's going to annoy me like heck otherwise. I suddenly thought I was unpicking the wrong seam, but of course I can't see the seam that's holding the seam binding onto the first side. because of course it's inside, isn't it? Okay, panic over. It looks like it's going to be a pretty normal week for Mr. Stitches. He's going to be going to work as usual, I guess, because he doesn't have any appointments this week. And probably a pretty normal week for me too. Just checking my microphone there. I don't take anything for granted with that microphone these days. Yeah, I'm very excited to have a couple of Amazon parcels on the way. I'm not a big Amazon shopper, but they are pretty good for some things. And I did receive a nice juicy gift card for Christmas. And so what I've done is I've invested in some things for, hopefully, my craft market in the summer. So I'm looking forward to getting that stuff. One of the things I ordered was a big pack of zippers. Did I already tell you this? I may have already told you this. I'll just show you when it arrives. We'll do a little unboxing like all the other big vloggers do, right? I keep telling myself, I really like the way that vlogger does this or that vlogger does that. And they're really popular and maybe they're doing something right. And I have to remind myself, wait a second. I am my own person. I want to do things a certain way. It'll be because it fits with the way I want to do things, right? I don't want to sort of do things the way other people do them just to get the likes and subscribes. That's not me. Well, I think by the time I put together this little bit of rambling and the other two little sections where I showed you the other things I've been making, it'll probably be long enough for a vlog. Do you know what my sister said the other day? I couldn't believe it. I told her that I'd be updating people on Mr. Stitch's health on the vlog, and I guess she thought, oh, well, maybe I'll watch that so that I don't have to keep bugging my sister as to what's going on. I can just find out by watching her videos. She said, when I saw it was 39 minutes, I thought, I haven't got that much time. Sit down and watch a video. This is my sister. She should love me enough to watch every one of my videos from start to finish. Same with my mother. She's sitting in the care home. She does like to read. She watches a bit of TV. At some point, she's got to have a little bit of time to spend half an hour every few days with her favorite daughter, right? I had to say that. Maybe I should tell her that I mention her in this video and it'll make her watch. Wouldn't that be fun? Love you, Mum. Love you, sister. Oh, dear. Oh, boy. Unpicking stitches is probably one of the boringest parts of sewing, isn't it? Oh, sorry, I mean reverse sewing, of course. So I'm pretty fed up with this job. I think I might leave it for tomorrow. I could go up and be spending time on the couch doing my knitting instead, couldn't I? Which would probably be a lot more pleasant. Thought I was going to just get these done in a couple of hours, be able to put them aside. Nope. I think I'll call that quits for tonight. I'm just filming this little segment because I finished the beanie, and I popped the photo of it up on Instagram and Facebook, and a friend of mine said that she'd like to have the hat. She said she'd buy it. I said, you can have it. It's not worth paying for. So I'm going to record this now so that when I see her next, I can give it to her, having already shown it to you guys. This is the yarn I used, Spindle Yarns. It's a Fabricland Canada brand, generic brand, store brand. That's more like it. And they don't do spindle anymore. They call them tailor now. Bulky basics, 100% acrylic, not the nicest. It feels acrylic-y is all I can say about that. It's not particularly soft. It's not particularly lovely. So I had 2 balls of this in the stash, and I mentioned in my last vlog that I had wound up 3 cakes of it. So, of course, the 2 cakes I had were mixed, and I didn't notice at the time, but they must have been different dye lots, because it wasn't until I was taking a photograph of this in my living room with the hat laid flat. I had all my lamps on so I could get a decent light. It's not as good as this ring light, though. But if you look carefully, you see how it's kind of subtle depending on how you look at it. But when you lie the hat flat, you can see that there are 2 different dye lots. Like about here, it's all like a bright cream. And then the cream becomes more of a beige. Can you tell? When you open the hat out and look at it straight on, I don't think it's quite so noticeable. It's a shame because I made this absolute perfect size. I did my little hat recipe where I do actually have a pattern on my blog that's called the Adjustable Crochet Hat. And I also listed it on Ravelry. It's free. All my patterns are free. And this is made from the top down. It's a bulky hat, although you could use any yarn, because you're just using this basic recipe where you start here, you're working in a spiral until you get down to the depth you want. And then because you're in a spiral, you have this kind of step at the bottom. And you can just shorten your stitches down to a slip stitch and finish off for a plain hat. But I like to, once I get here, so you're working from this way, right? So you're crocheting along, and when you decide your hat is deep enough, you get to here, and then you work some chains, which would be these. I'll unbutton this so you can see. So you're working these chains, and then you turn it around, and you work back into the chains. Now I found out that you don't really want to work into this one here because it makes it a bit bumpy. So I skipped that one, and then I just fastened off here, sewed my tail in to that stitch there, and then I have a little flap. So then what you can do is you can just attach a button, and it just attaches to the hat by going between 2 stitches. Now the original hat I made was in double crochet, US double, UK treble. I used half double for this, which makes it more dense and a bit more warm, I think, because there aren't so many big holes in the stitches, and it fits so well. I crocheted a flat circle until it was as long as my hand, which is about 7 inches, which is perfect because by the time you start to work straight, you add a little bit of circumference. And I did it about, let's have a look, about 8 inches deep. Yeah. So 8 inches deep works really well for me. I like to have most of my ears covered in a beanie. So I used a button. A shank button's a good idea for knitwear or crochet wear. And because the yarn was really bulky, but I wanted to use the matching yarn, I split it because otherwise it wouldn't have gone through the hole in the shank with the needle and the 2 thicknesses of yarn. So I split the yarn into a couple of plies, and then I used that to sew it on. So if I hadn't had to join 2 cakes together, there would have just been 2 ends to sew in. There would have just been one here and one here. But there were 2 cakes, and so I did have a couple extra tails to weave in. But it was super easy and super quick. I ended up finishing it yesterday when I was waiting for my husband at the oral surgeon. As for the yarn that's left, I think you might be able to tell, but I think this is the brighter cream and then this is the duller cream here. So what I'm going to do with the rest of it is I'm just going to toss that last little bit of that yarn into my ongoing thrift collecting bag, and it'll be out of my house forever. Yippee. Well, I'm pretty pleased with my production. I started out by making the 2 fabric baskets of this size and accidentally had them coming out different orientation. I thought I liked this one better at first, but now I prefer this one. So then I made this second size up, and then I made this the biggest size, and then I went down and made the smallest ones. And I used up all of the tan lining, so I went on to pink in the same pattern. Had a bit of fun with the interfacing on this one. It's not looking great, but these are just for me to put my product in. They're not for sale. So I have 2. I made them in sets of 2. So I made 2 of each size. And this is Rosie's Fold Flat Fabric Basket. Rosie's art studio. She has so many good tutorials on her YouTube. It's amazing. I've joined her Facebook group as well. And the initial measurements for the one she shows on the video, 5-inch deep. That's when she talks deep, she's talking about this measurement. 5 inches by 5 inches tall by 7 inches across. Yeah, the width. So wide, deep, height. And so I did her measurements first, see how they came out. Instead of doing 1/2 inch seam allowance, I used 3/8. So that's why I've added 3/4, because it's twice the seam allowance on here. So then I figured out everything. I wrote it all out so that if I want to repeat this, I don't have to go back and look at her figures. So when I did the next size up, I added 1 inch to the width and the depth, but I kept it the same height. And then when I made the next size up again, I added another 1 inch to the width and the depth, but kept the same height. So all of these 3 larger sizes are all the same height. And then when I went for the small one, I thought I wanted to make it shallower. So I used a width of 6, a height of 4, and a depth of 4. And there's a limit to how shallow you can go on these, because this flap down here is always going to be half the depth of your bag. So for a bag this size with a 4-inch depth, you have to fold up 2 inches. So you couldn't really have a 2-inch deep bag, because this point would come right to the top, and that would probably be a right pain. It would get in the way of your stitching and everything, and it'd probably look weird. So you could probably go with a 4-inch depth bag, you could probably go 3 inches tall, but I wouldn't go any less than that. She does warn you about that in the video. As I say, her videos are really detailed, really thorough. I think anyone could make anything if she's demonstrating, because she doesn't leave anything out. She tells you exactly what she's doing. She tells you her stitch lengths, so you don't have to guess. I mean, I watch a lot of these videos by people in Japan or the Philippines, and they're fantastic, but you do have to know a lot of basics ahead of time, because they don't hold your hand through it. Rosie holds your hand through it, so that's great. So that's what I've done. So what are you doing? What are you making? How did you enjoy your weekend? Hopefully you got some fun stuff done, and you have a good week ahead. And I'll be sure to show you these chair pads when I finally get them done. I promised myself to finish them before I move on to another sewing project. There you go. I've said it in public, so I have to stick to it now, right? Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Talk to you again soon. Bye for now.